What's going on, everybody? This Afro think tank. Europeans react to UN resolution vote to call the transatlantic slave trade the gravest crime in world history. Now, this is going to be a balanced and even review. All right, we're gonna have some good white folk. We're gonna have some bad white folk. Some of these white folks gonna piss you off. I ain't gonna lie. Some of these white folks gonna piss you off, but I got some good light-skinned folk up in here. All right, that's gonna, counterbalance. It's gonna be balanced. All right, so it's all good. But there's a serious reaction happening. You got everything that you're gonna hear in this video. All the excuses made. Listen, I want you to pay attention to the excuses that are made for why Europeans should not have to pay reparations. And it's gonna sound eerily familiar, because you've been hearing a certain group of black people called FBA repeat these. You'll see where they got it from. This is the origin of the talking points of FBA, because they're so unintelligent. Their minds are so empty. You can pour anything in there and it will run that 2 brain cells they got. Even though one is, running at 20% and the other one's running at 60%. So altogether, they got about 80% worth capacity. They got like almost a whole brain cell worth of activity going in their head, right? But anyway, without further ado, let's see what the Europeans think about this. And when I say Europeans, that means all Europeans, all around the world, all right? Anyway, you tell me what you guys think in the comment section. This is Afro Think Tank. Learn something, teach something. I'm out.
Incredible about this is that reparation would, at the low end, would cost us billions, at the middle would cost us trillions, and at the top end would cost us probably the entire economy's GDP. And yet we have the UK's representative not say, this is ridiculous, all bad things have happened in the past, we can't have actions every time something wrong has happened on our watch. Instead of that, they say, actually, not a bad point. I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to abstain on this. How on earth could our country abstain with something which could literally wipe our economy out? Why haven't we got a prime minister or a foreign secretary or a permanent secretary of the Foreign Office stand up and say, we are not abstaining on this issue? It is completely wrong. We are fighting for our people. We are not paying 1 penny. We are voting against. Who made that decision? Please, was it you, Yvette Cooper? Was it you, Starmer? Was it you? I don't know who it could be. Who could possibly have said we should abstain on an important issue which would affect? Don't worry about what's happening in Iran. This would be 1,000 Irans, right? So please, would somebody from the Labour Party explain to me how such a decision was made?
This happened yesterday.
Gathering in the name of remembrance and reparations to back a draft resolution recognising the transatlantic slave trade as the gravest crime against humanity.
The result of the vote is as follows. In favour, 123, against 3, abstentions 52.
Argentina, Israel and the US voting against the resolution.
The United States, as well as Europe and the UK, who abstain from voting, essentially are all the primary beneficiaries of the transatlantic slave trade. So, of course, none of them want to pay any damages for any of that. But another reason that the US government is motivated to vote against a resolution like this is that slavery is still legal in the United States. Read the 13th Amendment. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. Robin McDowell and Margie Mason at AP News released this article that is an incredible piece of reporting about how the state of Alabama specifically has historically been one of the worst offenders for profiting off of inmate labor. I really recommend you go read the article, but it speaks about how Alabama has this program where it leases its inmates to around over 500 local businesses where they have to work or face some sort of punishment. And despite being paid minimum wage, $7.25 an hour, the state takes 40% off the top of that gross wage. If inmates get like a warning from their boss, they can face punishment back in prison. This has made Alabama hundreds of millions of dollars. As the article notes, in 2022, Alabama actually removed the incarceration exception from its state constitution anti-slavery amendment. Now, the crazy part is the majority of states have not removed this incarceration exception from their state constitutions, and of course, in the federal constitution, this exception still exists. In many states, still, inmate labor is not only required, it is completely unpaid. Now, does it make sense why the United States would vote no against this resolution? And would it surprise you to learn that despite having only 4% of the Earth's population, the United States holds 20%, 1/5 of the Earth's incarcerated population? And would it surprise you to learn as well that despite making up only 15% of the United States population, Black Americans represent 40%, 2/5 of our incarcerated population? I'll let you connect the dots.
What has been going on in the United Nations, and what has been the response of His Majesty's government? Well, in the United Nations General Assembly, they've had a vote that says that we should pay reparations. And what do you think this bold, forthright, courageous government did, led by a man who only recently had his head in his hands in the House of Commons? It abstained. So the motion went through. And although the General Assembly, in a way, doesn't matter, its votes aren't binding, it's symbolic and it's indicative of how weak this government is. Let's be clear, there is no argument for reparations at all. First of all, it was the Royal Navy that put down the slave trade, the Royal Navy that stopped slavery across the globe. The United Kingdom was the first country of any significance to stop slavery. Denmark may have done it first, but Denmark had no ability to stop the slave trade. We did. We banned it across the whole of the British Empire in the 1830s, whilst other countries, even our allies, were still trying to slave trade. And the slaves themselves were traded by their neighbours. They didn't come into the system from us and from our iniquity. It was the British who brought it to an end. Something, actually, however evil it is, that had been part of human society since time immemorial. And now greedy nations are asking for more money from us. Nations that should be grateful for what we did in our civilizing role across the world when we stopped awful things happening. We took the rule of law, we took democracy to nations, we took the common law, which has been so powerful in developing countries and increasing prosperity, and we stopped the great evil of slavery. Not only should we not pay reparations, but we should be paid for the work that we did to make the world a more secure and a better one. And the United Nations vote is part of a slippery slope. You see this with the lunatic Chagos judgment that came from a United Nations court. It has and had no legal force, yet the government decided that it wanted to follow it nonetheless. So these motions, though technically unimportant, set a tone, set a way of thinking that then becomes more common and gathers momentum. It is utterly feeble that this government didn't oppose it, but then it is an utterly feeble government.
Britain was the first nation to ban slavery, but what made them do it? Well, it's a story of profit and greed that so dehumanised people that it lit the spark for abolition. In 1781, a British slave ship called Zong left Acre with 442 enslaved Africans on board, double its capacity. After a navigational error, the ship missed Jamaica, prolonging its voyage. The crew claimed that water was running low and it threatened the survival of all on board. So the crew made a horrific decision to throw 130 enslaved people into the sea, asserting that it was necessary to save the lives of the rest. Once Zong found port, its owners submitted an insurance claim for the lost cargo. The case, Gregson versus Gilbert, wasn't about murder, inhumane conditions, or mistreatment. It was about the money lost. Lord Chief Justice Mansfield compared the loss to that of horses thrown overboard, which just goes to show the brutal, widespread commodification of human lives at the time. Abolitionists like Equiano and Sharp brought this case to the public's attention, fueling the abolitionist movement in Britain. Equiano helped publish the details of the massacre, and Sharp lobbied Parliament with powerful anti-slavery rhetoric. Public outrage followed. The Zong became a symbol of slavery's inhumanity, used in speeches, literature, and protests to awaken the British conscience. While it did take decades to abolish slavery, this case helped shock the public and turn the tide, from turning a blind eye to action on the streets.
The United Nations passed a resolution yesterday that declared that the transatlantic slave trade was the worst thing that happened, the worst crime against humanity that ever happened. And all the countries in the world agreed, except for 3. Can you guess which 3? Well, the first one is Israel, because why would they take accountability for fucking anything? Right? Like, why? Why would they take any fucking accountability? They steal people's land and they declare it their own because they're God's chosen people. So I'm not surprised. Second one is Argentina. Yeah, Argentina. Well, they harbored Nazis, so why would they take any accountability as well? Why would they join in to declare that as a fact? And the third one is the great United States. Like, they're the colonizers. We're the colonizers. Why would we take accountability for fucking anything as well? The arrogance of Americans and the United States are far greater than its benefit. When you refuse to stand up to what you have done and admit that you were wrong, you cause much greater harm to all those around you. So there's that.
Let's just make it equal instead of just being like, okay, black people get this, Native Americans get this, white people get this. Let's be like, all right, we all get everything.
Because think about it this way. White people didn't undergo 250 years of slavery and its aftermath. White people didn't suffer through racial segregation. White people didn't have a government that restricted their ability to own property, open a business, or own a bank account to grow generational wealth for their children and their children's children. White people didn't have to go through these things. So if we were just to ignore the fact that black people in America had to go through all of these things that have now systemically disadvantaged them even today, and we were instead to say, ignore one's race and treat everybody the same, well then all of a sudden black people will continue to be disparaged. Imagine if you were playing a game of Monopoly with your friends, the banker for whatever reason really hated you. He only gave you $10, gave everyone else $50, right? Then Mr. Jesus 2.0, man of equality, walks in and he says, well, I understand that you've been disadvantaged. I have the option to now give you an additional $40 to account for the fact that the banker kind of cheated you out of $40 to begin with. But instead, I'm just going to continue to treat you the same way I'm going to treat everybody else. Well, then all of a sudden, you're still experiencing a disadvantage today. And when we talk about programs or legislation to say target Black Americans or target Indigenous Americans, it aims to serve to fix the consequences of systemic forms of oppression in which have disadvantaged Black Americans or Indigenous Americans historically, which has perpetuated negative consequences that exist today for Black Americans or Indigenous Americans that don't exist for white Americans.
Stand. Boycott diamonds and gold. Free Sudan. Boycott diamonds and gold. We most definitely cannot forget about the people of Sudan.
Thanks for watching Afro Think Tank. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And follow me on Substack and Patreon for more content. Remember, it's Pan-Africanism or nothing.